April the 15th. Thanks for those in attendance. Speaking of attendance, Councillor Chambers will not be with us today and Councillor Oakley will not be with us today. The rest of committee is here. As far as the agenda, does anybody have anything to add to the agenda? Okay, seeing none, can I get approval of the agenda, please? Mayor Bailey, Councillor Howes, questions? All in favor? Opposed? That, oh yeah. Okay, so we're gonna, because our electronic voting is not working, we're gonna be doing recorded votes for everything today as we would usually do. The question I'm gonna ask of committee is, as the bylaw stands right now, when we ask for a recorded vote, those in favor stand up. And when the vote is taken. Is committee good with that? Councillor Miller?
I'll move that the procedural bylaw be temporarily suspended for this meeting and that we don't have to stand up for every vote.
Okay, seconder, Mayor Bailey. Okay, so everybody understands that, so it'll be a show of hands for in favor and then a show of hands for not in favor. Everybody, committee's good with that? Okay, all in favor? Oh, sorry, we'll call the vote. All those in favor? Everything's going to be a recorded vote. Okay, so just to reconfirm that, all votes are going to be recorded vote, and we're going to do it by hand. Thank you. Declaration of pecuniary interest. Any at this point? Councillor Garneau.
Sorry.
Oh, hang on.
The regular approval of the agenda now. We just
Right, we have changed that. So we're going to now approve the agenda as amended with the bylaw there. So we'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Now, pecuniary interest, Councillor Garneau.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 8.1 for business reasons.
8.1, thank you. Any others? If they do arise through the meeting, just let us know and we will go from there. Okay, delegations today. We've got one delegation. Jim, I'm going to try to pronounce the last name. Is it Baruzzi? Bruzzies?
Bruzzies, that's correct.
Bruzzies? Okay. Jim's got a presentation for the management consultant for the water and wastewater rate study. So, Jim, go ahead. You've got 10 minutes, and then we'll go for questions after that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just call up the study here. So can everybody see that?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. In terms of the agenda, what I'd like to do today is just review the process, talk a little bit about the background information, show you options on the rate structure and how we evaluated those options in terms of goals and objectives of the municipality and our recommendation in terms of a rate structure. Long range financial plan. In terms of the rates, we have two options that we'll be showing you today with regard to the financing of the capital. And then the various rate options and a summary of our recommendations. Excuse me. So in terms of the water and wastewater rate review, we know that Brant County is committed to providing rates that are sustainable, fair, and affordable. And that's evidenced from the county in the preparation of an asset management plan. The county has established reserve and debt policies. And in 2024, a long-range financial plan was completed for water and wastewater in accordance with the Ontario regulations. So this phase of the project essentially is now that the rate revenues are known in terms of the long-range financial plan. This is to determine the rate structure and how those revenues would be recovered from the various ratepayers. In terms of the review process, like I said, the long-range financial plan has been conducted and completed in 2024. And now in terms of the rate structure review, which is this presentation, we'll be looking at the rate structure, benchmarking the goals and objectives, options, and then an impact analysis to the customers. Next slide is the background information. So in terms of the background information, I just want to just go through quickly the current rate structure. So the Brant County has a two-part rate structure, a fixed rate component and a volumetric rate component. And that's in accordance with leading practice across Ontario municipalities. So you can see the rates in terms of the fixed rates. For water, there's a fixed rate based on meter size, and wastewater, the same thing. And in terms of the volumetric, what you have is, it's called the humpback volumetric rate structure, where you have volumetric rates for various consumption. For 0 to 15, for example, in water, it's $2.22 per square meter, and in wastewater, $1.72. Above the 15 cubic meters to 45 cubic meters, there's an increase in the rates, and that's mainly attributed to conservation efforts. And then 45 to 100, another increase. And then for economic development purposes, the rates go back to the lowest rate, 0 to 15. In the terms of water conservation, you also have a premium seasonal rate, and that's between May and August for any residential consumers using over 45 cubic meters. So in terms of the benchmarking, what we did is we looked at the residential cost of service. And in this instance, we used an average of about 200 cubic meters per residential property. And you can see from this chart, total survey, we have a database of over 120 municipalities in Ontario. And in terms of the survey total, the annual charge for water and wastewater is $1,393. We looked at the Southwest municipalities, and it's about $1,489. And then Brant, the annual charge is about $1,573, which is about $84 per year or $7 a month over the Southwest average. And a lot of this is driven in part by, in terms of the residential, you have a higher than average fixed monthly allocation in terms of the other municipalities. And it's a very costly system that you have to operate. So we also looked at commercial cost of service, 10,000 cubic meters with a 2-inch meter. And you can see the total survey average is 45,000. The Southwest average is 46,384. And you're just slightly below the Southwest average, 46,155. So you can see that in terms of the commercial, you're more competitive. And again, that's attributed mainly to the fixed rate charge, which affects the low consumption residential users. And we'll be addressing that in the course of this rate study. So in terms of the challenges, risks, and opportunity, as I mentioned, you have a very complex, costly water and wastewater system. You have, in fact, 5 water systems and 4 wastewater systems. When you take a large municipality like Hamilton, you can control costs more because it's essentially one system for water and wastewater. Then so the operating costs of these systems are also impacted by low population density, geography, and complexity. You have limited availability of capital reserves for the replacement, refurbishment of the assets. And so as a result of that, there's going to be an increased reliance on debt into the future, and we'll show you that. The provincial standards and regulations also are becoming more complex and costly, and the operating and capital costs in water and wastewater operations have been exceeding inflation. And then the other challenge is we talked about affordability, especially in the residential sector. So that's a challenge going forward as well. So we looked at various rate structures. And so the first thing we did is we looked at the goals and objectives on which they should be evaluated. And these are the goals and objectives: fairness and equity, water conservation, residential affordability that I just talked about, economic development, you want competitive water rates, and revenue sustainability, which is most important. You want sufficient revenues to cover the cost of operation and replace the existing assets on a timely basis. So the volumetric rate options, first of all, these are the types of volumetric rates used across the various municipalities. The most common is a uniform rate, which everybody pays the same regardless of volume. Some municipalities have an inclining rate, so as consumption increases, the rate increases, and that's mainly due to or as a result of conservation efforts for those municipalities. Some municipalities have an economic development, which is a declining rate structure. So the more you use, the less you pay. So in terms of economic development, there's some large water users that would benefit as a result of that. And then, as I say, you have your existing rate structure as a humpback. And in terms of the humpback rate structure, you're achieving a lot of the goals and objectives. You have conservation because there's an inclining rate, residential affordability, and economic development where the rate decreases. So what we wanted to do is as a result of looking at the various rate structure options, we wanted to determine how a change in rate structure would affect the various classes of property owners. So you can see in the 0 to 15, 74% of the residential consumption is then that tier rate, which is the lowest rate. And in terms of the highest rate, 58% of the commercial consumption is in that tier 4. So they benefit from that reduction in the upper tier rate. So that's the volumetric. In terms of the fixed component, what we did is we looked at the amount collected in revenues from the fixed component and the volumetric component. And you can see from this chart, Brant County collects 55% of the water revenues from the fixed component and 45% from the volumetric. So if you look just below that, the survey of 120 plus municipalities in Ontario, the fixed component is 46%. So you can see it's lower than the amount that the fixed component in Brant County. And in terms of wastewater, the fixed component is pretty much in line with the survey average. So while this supports revenue stability, it does pose a challenge in terms of water conservation because the fix is higher, so the volumetric rate would be lower. And it also has an impact on residential affordability. Low volume users would be paying more because the majority of their costs would be on the fixed rate.
Jim, sorry to interrupt you there for 1 second. Our 10 minutes is up here, so I'm going to ask committee if they're okay if we go over. Councillor Bell, Councillor Kyle, I'll call the vote on that. All in favor? Opposed? Thank you for that, committee. Go ahead, Jim.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the rate structure recommendations, as a result of looking at the goals and objectives and the benchmarking, we're recommending to reduce the allocation of water costs recovered from the fixed monthly fee, where you saw it was higher than the provincial average. And we're recommending 2% annually till it gets down to the average. We didn't want to go higher than that because what it does, it would greatly affect those commercial users. So we wanted to kind of phase that in. But this does help improve residential affordability, and it does support conservation. And in terms of the volumetric rate structure, as I say, it meets your goals and objectives. So we're recommending to maintain that humpback rate structure to support conservation, residential affordability, and economic development. So just to kind of summarize, you met the goal of fairness and equity. You have a 2-part rate structure, the fixed recovering some infrastructure maintenance charges and the consumption reflecting the actual water usage. There's water conservation efforts. You have a seasonal rate for the summer months. We're lowering the water fixed allocation, and you do have inclining consumption rates. Residential affordability, by reducing that water fixed, it benefits these low volume consumers. Economic development, you have competitive rates because the lower rate is charged for high volume users. And in terms of revenue sustainability, what we did in calculating rates, we employed the full cost of service. Next slide. So just gonna get into the financing options. So this is your existing water capital budget. And you can see from the capital budget from 25 to 29, you have $46.7 million in capital spending. And in terms of the amounts that are recovered from the rates, it's $21.3 million. And then about $16 million recovered from development charges, but there'll be a deficit in the development charge collections. So there has to be some debt issued on behalf of development charges, which are recovered from development charges, and they equate to about 7.6. But you can see the reserve contribution, 21.6. It's very significant. The next slide is the wastewater. So in terms of wastewater, we're showing two options here. One of the big projects that you have on the horizon is the expansion of Paris facilities. So the first scenario, the first option, you have to recover as a result of the capital budget. It's significant, as I say, $239.8 million. And how it's currently being recommended in terms of the capital budget, of that, 9.7 million is going to be recovered from reserves. And development charges, a lot of that project obviously is growth related. So development charges and development debt, that equates to about 120 million. And then there isn't enough to cover the non-growth portion, or sorry, the growth portion not recovered from development charges. So as a result of that project, it's anticipated you have to issue about $43 million in debt. You can see on the chart there, it starts in 2027, and it's about 14.4 for the 27, 28, 29. So that's one option. The second option, staff provided a second option. And essentially, the second option, what it entails is an increase in federal and provincial grants. So that's going to the province and federal government for additional looking for additional grant opportunities. The second big element is the recoveries, is 125 from, and that's essentially from front-end financing agreements. So essentially, the affordability on these projects, this project, would have a lot of it would have to come from front-end financing agreements to manage your debt levels. So you can see the DC debt in the first scenario is 111 million. In the second scenario, it's 6 million. The debentures in the first scenario for the rate recoveries is 43.2 million, and in the second scenario is 35.7 million. So it's recovering the funds, again, trying to get additional provincial dollars and front-ending financing from developers. So the next slide is just showing the two options. And the DC debt that would have, you can see that in the middle there, the DC debt that would have to be issued over the two options that I just mentioned. And then the other big thing separating the two is the recoveries. Next slide. So the water, there's just the one option. As a result of the contributions, they're sufficient to cover the essentially the capital. So you can see the water debt outstanding decreases from both 3.6 to 2 million. Next slide is the wastewater debt outstanding. And then under the two scenarios, scenario one, which is the blue line, that would be additional. The debt outstanding in 2029 would be about 48.5 million. And then in scenario two, the red line, by the time you get to 2029, it would still be quite significant, 40.5 million. So one of the financial metrics that is used to sort of control the debt is water debt charges as a percentage of own source revenue. And then the leading practice or the metric, what like municipalities like to do is to not be more than 15% of debt charges as a percentage of own source revenue. And as I say, in terms of water, this is the water chart. There's no new debt, so it decreases from about 5% to 4%. So you're well within that 15% maximum. In terms of the wastewater, however, under both scenarios, it's quite significant. By 2030, in scenario one, the water debt charges as a percentage of own source revenue would be about 43.1%. And then scenario two, 38.9%. So you can see it's greatly exceeding that 15%. But it is the result of a large Paris project. Next slide is. So what we're recommending is on a go-forward basis, option two, which includes that front-end developer agreement and additional contributions from the other levels of government. So in terms of the customer impact, first of all, looking at the residential 5/8 inch meter, in this instance, we're using 180 cubic meters a year. So you can see on the left-hand side, scenario one, which is an increase in 2025 on the residential, about 5.7%. That equates to about $7 additional per month. And then on scenario two, the increase would be about 5%, almost 5%. And that would equate to about $5.90 in the first year. And then it would increase to about $7 in 2026. And then, so in terms of the summary, what we're recommending is reducing that. We also show the commercial is you can see the increases, they're slightly larger, and that's a result of the decreased fixed charge, and that results in a slight increase in the volumetric charge. So you can see the increases around 9% in scenario one and about 8%, well, in the first year, 8% in scenario two. So to summarize, we're recommending reducing the fixed monthly allocation over a 4-year period, which results in about 2% reduction in the water fixed annually. No reduction in wastewater. You're at pretty much the provincial average. We recommend maintaining the humpback rate structure. We recommend for conservation maintaining the residential seasonal rates. And we're also finally recommending the option two, which is the front end financing and increased grants. And that's Mr. Chairman, that's the end of the presentation. Be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Jim. Questions from committee? Councillor Howes, we'll start with you.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Through you to the delegation, I can see the appeal of your recommendation of option two. I'm just trying to figure out how confident we are on the additional financial support from the other levels of government.
I'll refer to staff, but the thing is on this is that the project doesn't start taking place until 2027. So there's just over a year, I guess, of time to negotiate. And if there's a change in that, the rates could be adjusted next year. But in terms of how confident, I think staff is in the best position to answer that. They're the ones negotiating.
Anybody from staff want to? Heather?
We set it up as just a recoverable either as a grant or as a front-ending agreement with the developers, on the basis that we at this point aren't sure that we can move forward with this project without getting some support in one of those two fashions. So that's why that was put forward as an option.
Councillor House?
Follow up then, please, through you, Mr. Chair. So if council was to support the recommendation for option 2, and a year and a half from now, it turns out that we don't have the financial support from the other levels of government, we're able to pivot at that point into a modified version where the funds that we were anticipating getting from the other levels of government would switch back to the concept of long-term development charge debt?
No, the point was we didn't want to go into that much debt. That was our big concern, that our ARL won't support that much debt at one time. So if we aren't successful in terms of getting any provincial or federal funding, we will absolutely have to be looking at entering into agreements with the developers that are going to benefit from that additional capacity to assume some of that debt in terms of upfront, like we're doing in St. George for the water pollution plant.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to our delegate. There was a lot of information there, and I want to make sure I understood correctly. The one slide showed some noticeable increases in commercial rates, and did I catch a comment that that's what's making up the difference because of then the declining 2% on the monthly allocation?
That's correct, and there is some capacity to increase that slightly more, because when we looked at the benchmarking, you were below the average on the Southwest. And if we didn't reduce the fixed, obviously there would be a greater impact on the residential sector.
Councillor Garneau?
Thank you.
Councillor Bell?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to our presenter, a couple of questions, if I may. On slide 24, you show that we will be well beyond the recommended level of debt as a function of our own source revenue. I'm not sure I like either option 1 or 2, to be perfectly honest. Could I ask, maybe it's you or maybe it's staff, is this doable? I think there's a 25% Municipal Act limit. So what happens when we go beyond 25%?
The 25%, maybe I could start off, sorry. The 25% limit is on a corporate basis. So you'd have to look at all of the debt issued in the corporation to ensure that it's below that 25% limitation. It's not on a functional basis.
So it's not, we don't sequester each element and have to deal with each element separately. But maybe a question then to Heather Boyd, if I may, Mr. Chair. So what does this do to our overall debt levels as a percentage of our own total revenues?
Heather?
Option 1, the flat out everything paid for debt is what we had modeled in the long-term financial plan. So it would carry forward on those debt levels, absolutely exceeding our 15%. I can't remember if it took us over the 25%, but it took us well beyond our comfort level.
So if we follow through on this, do we have at some point as council to have a conversation about resetting our debt level? Or that with which we would be comfortable?
Yeah, part of our implementation of the long-term financial plan, first thing we're going to deal with is kind of project moving forward timelines. But one of the pieces we are bringing back is a discussion on debt levels and whether we need to consider changing our self-imposed 15% limit.
When will that be, Heather?
I would expect that piece will be coming early fall.
Okay, thank you. Second question, if I may, Mr.
Go
Chair.
ahead, yeah.
In option 2, the recoveries, I think it's slide number 19. I can understand that in option 1, where you show recoveries, I think that's probably really related to St. George. And St. George hasn't really started its development yet. So it's quite conceivable to have a conversation with the developers that want to take St. George from 1,000 homes to 3,000 homes. But I struggle a little bit in understanding which developers in Paris we would have that conversation with in option 2, since we're well down the development track in Paris already.
Who can take a shot at that? Alison?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. So we'd have to examine the large developments coming up. There's, at least 3 that I can think of off the top of my head. They're going to have significant expansion in the Paris area. So those are the ones, and some of them are the same that we're dealing with in St. George. And most of those too, those larger developers, this is not a foreign concept to them. Most municipalities in the GTA, which they would have operated in, do operate on front-ending agreements in terms of infrastructure. So there's at least 3 that I can think of that we would be approaching in the Paris area.
So it would be really Corden, Sifton and TCA. They're the 3 that have yet to start developing in a serious way.
Correct.
Yeah, thank you. One final question.
Go ahead.
We talked about changing the water rates slightly. So tier 2 and tier 3 go up by 10 and 15%. Is that equally true for wastewater? Are we changing the wastewater rates in any way?
In terms of the wastewater, the proportion between fixed and volumetric, you're at pretty much the average of the other municipalities. So we're not recommending any change in the apportionment of that.
No, I understand that relative to the structure, but the actual rates for water, you're actually changing the tier 2 and tier 3 rates. Are we changing anything in respect of the rates we charge per cubic meter for wastewater?
Just the normal increase, no. Nothing outside of the normal increases.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Miller?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple questions. One to the presenter, Jim, and I just wanted to get your thoughts on the provincial and the federal government willing to help out, because if you look at the population, immigration, that's controlled by the feds. The province plays a large role in determining where people are settling. So if we go back 50 years and we ask for infrastructure funding, no problem. They'd be at the table ponying up big time. I'm just wondering, with all the emphasis on development and building more houses, do you see a greater willingness on the part of the province or the feds or both to pony up?
Yeah, actually, I haven't been involved in any negotiations with the province, so I really can't comment on that.
Okay, I just wondered if you've seen it with other municipalities that you've been working with. I guess this is something, I don't know if the Government Relations Committee has taken this or got a handle on it, but I think, Mr. Chair, I think that's something that going forward, we need to make sure we have delegations, certainly at the provincial level and hopefully at the federal level. I want to ask, when we're looking at the projections, what interest rate are we using?
For the debt, we're using 4.5%. Sorry. Okay, first of all, on the debt, 4.5%, we amortize the debt over about 20-year period. In terms of the forecast on the operating expenditures, essentially about a 3% increase.
Okay, so I guess we're using the hope strategy then that interest rates don't go up, that inflation doesn't go up. You know, we've seen a big increase in construction costs over the last 5 years. I guess we're hoping we don't see that, and we hope the tariffs don't impact that. So is that correct? We're hoping, there's a lot of hope built into this?
That's correct. In the initial year, I think we're okay. And then if there's any changes in the economic conditions, this isn't binding on council in future years, so it could be reviewed in light of any changes in the economic conditions.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Any other questions from committee? Okay, just one question, Jim, if I could, on slide number 6, when you talk about your volumetric usage and that sort of thing, I just want to make sure that I understand this right. So is it scalable in the sense that for the first 15 cubic meters, you pay 222, and then for the next stage, you pay 245? Because where I'm going with this is hypothetically, if you've got somebody that's using 100 cubic meters of water, okay? So they're gonna be paying $256 for that. If they use 100.1 cubic meters, then they're only gonna be paying $224. So I understand we wanna look at conservation and stuff like that, but is it a scalable thing, or is it, if you're that 100.1 or you're up to 100, you pay that rate for every cubic meter?
Everybody pays 0 to 15 that rate, and everybody pays the 15 to 45, and then 45 to 100. If you go to 100.1, that 0.1 would be charged the 222 only, and then the rest of the rates would be in accordance with the other ranges.
Okay, so it's not the fact of if I use 100.1, I'm only paying 222 for each square meter?
No, that's correct.
All right, I just wanted to just clarify that, because I'm thinking if that's the case, have another cup of water, I guess, who knows, but. Okay, no, I appreciate that. So any other question, no other questions from committee? Okay, we don't have a motion at this point in time. I'm not sure if committee is looking just to receive this or how we want to go forward. Are we looking for an answer of option 1, option 2 at this point in time? Or do we receive it now and answer that question later? I'm not sure. Heather?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I do have a report later, and at this point, it's just to be received. With Andrea, we're organizing an open house, so there'll be a public engagement piece. And then we'll come back in May for actual approval of the rate structure.
Perfect, okay. So I'm looking for a motion just to receive as information. Councillor Coleman, Councillor Kyle, any questions? Okay, so I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried unanimously. Okay, thank you for that, and thank you very much, Jim.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving on to section 5, adoption of the previous minutes. Can I get a mover, please? Councillor Howes, Councillor Kyle, any questions from those previous minutes? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. If I could just ask committee just to leave those hands up for just an extra second, that would be great. Any business arising from those minutes? Seeing none, we will move on. Consent items to be approved. We have, by the looks of it, just one. Okay. 7.1, which is 4 of them, yes. Does anybody want any of those removed? Can I get a mover to approve them all? Councillor Bell, Mayor Bailey. Any questions? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you. Consent items to be received. Again, there are 4. Does anybody want any pulled? Counselor Miller?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'd like to maybe chat a little bit about 7.2.1.
7.2.1. Anybody else? Okay, so I'm going to call the vote on 7.2.2.3 and .4. All those in favor? Opposed? Those are carried. 7.2.1, Counselor Miller.
Just a couple questions, if I could. Would it be fair to say that the 4 wastewater treatment facilities in the county are all at capacity?
Go ahead.
Through you, Chair. Canesville is at capacity. Paris has limited capacity. St. George is also at capacity currently, and Airport has limited capacity.
Okay, yeah, I think Paris, I think we said about 70%. Airport system, is that simply a big septic system? Would that be the best way to describe it?
Through you, Chair. There is holding tanks, there is a treatment train, and then there is an infiltration gallery. So it does look like an advanced septic system, but there is more to it.
Okay. It looked like a big septic system to me, but, so as part of improving that, like, at least we have a plan for St. George. We're working on a plan for Paris. Canesville, we have a plan. Airport, we're going to see a plan, is that correct? Sometime this summer, or start that process?
Through you, Chair, to Councillor Miller. We're currently wrapping up an inspection with the Ministry of the Environment right now. We're also awaiting comments about our impact assessment for airport sewage treatment system. And from both of those pieces of information from the province, we'll have to develop a plan on how to manage the system.
Okay, thank you. And I just, Mr. Chair, when you're reading this and you sit at planning, I don't see the dots being connected, because we see the growth coming when we look at our planning applications. But, I mean, if one said that all our systems were at capacity, you'd be pretty accurate. And we see things like 4 units as a right coming forward, and we should do that in order to get federal funding. But just, like I say, it's just, I don't know how we do that when we're having trouble keeping up with the infrastructure now. And I thought it was a good report. It kind of put things in perspective for me. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Andrea. Andrea, we had a maximum peak flow rate in Paris of what seems like twice the normal peak flow rate. Was there some particular event? Was that a weather event or something else?
Through you, Chair, to Councillor Bell. I'll have to pull up the data from the report. I can't think off the top of my head what that specific flow was from.
And at that peak flow rate, I assume the plant managed within our operational limits.
Through you, Chair. Correct.
So does that then give us some confidence that we've got a bit more capacity than perhaps we're telling ourselves we have?
Through you, Chair, I'd have to follow up to get the details on that, but I know there are challenges in Paris, and I'd have to look at exactly where those peak flows came from.
Because if we can go to, on that day, we went to 220% of the average daily flow rate. And if we handle that without a problem, that gives me a little bit of confidence there is some capacity there to accommodate the growth we have. And we are now in early 2025. When do you think we will be in a position to begin construction of the next phase of water treatment in Paris?
Through you, Chair, I'd have to pose that question to our infrastructure planning team. They are finalizing the design options, and then it really will come down to funding strategies before a plan gets put in place for that.
Final related question, is it consistent with what we just heard on the water and wastewater study, which appeared to be 2027?
Through you, Chair, correct?
You'll come back to me.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor McAlpine, you had something? Can you throw your mic on, please?
I was just going to add to the conversation. I think that peak happened with that rain event in July that you might be referring to. And so a lot of the stormwater was going into the sewage system and that caused the peak.
Through you, Chair, there are some inflow and infiltration issues with sanitary systems in general. Aqua does work to do inspections and repairs on those things, but heavy rainfall events do contribute as absolutely. But I can confirm specifically where that max day flow event came from. Follow up.
Perfect. Any other questions from committee on 721? Okay, I'm going to call the vote on 7.2.1. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you. Okay, moving down to Section 8, staff reports, RPT-0162-25. Councillor Garneau's got the conflict. Parks and facilities fee update. Kathy, I don't know if you want to speak to it or just answer any questions. Any questions from committee? Can I get somebody to put it on the floor? Councillor Coleman, Councillor Howes. No questions? I'll call the vote. All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you. No. 8.2, RPT-0160-25 for the vehicle by hire vehicle age requirement. Can I get a mover to get it on the floor? Mayor Bailey, Councillor McAlpine. Questions on this report? Councillor Miller.
We're getting something on the floor. I'm not quite sure what we're getting on the floor, but there's a couple of options presented, and I wonder, I wouldn't mind if Greg could just speak to either, if that's okay, Mr. Chair.
Certainly. Greg?
Good morning, through the chair. So yeah, there are two options that are being presented this morning. One is status quo, where we maintain the age requirement to be 10 years old. It's more than 10 years old. The second option would be to increase that by 2 years. So vehicles that would be older than 12 years old would not be licensable. Also further to that, vehicles that would be older than 10 years old would be subject to safety standard certificates. So it would be 2 safeties per year.
Councillor Miller?
And on that note, Mr. Chair, I will move option B, and I'll speak to it if we,
So just to confirm, that's to put it to the 12 years?
yeah.
Seconder for that, Mayor Bailey. Councillor Miller, back to you.
Just a couple things. And I wanted to ask, maybe through you, Mr. Chair, to Greg. Greg, you said Uber doesn't allow vehicles older than 10 years, correct?
Through the chair, yeah, that's correct. We called them, and that was the policy when we enacted the bylaw in 2022, and we verified that prior to this report.
It's just, through Mr. Chair, to Greg, when Uber does that and they get a vehicle on the road, do you know if they safety it every year or just once when they first get the vehicle?
Through the chair, so the way the bylaw is designed is essentially Uber, the company, the corporation, is responsible for safety standard certificates. We don't license the vehicles, we don't license the drivers, we license the broker, which would be Uber.
No, I understand that, but do you know if their standards include a safety every year?
Through the chair, yeah, I believe that they do that. That was certainly a matter of policy back in 2022.
And my understanding, maybe Greg, can you confirm Guelph, City of Guelph doesn't have any standards for age of vehicles?
Through the chair, we haven't checked the City of Guelph, but we do know that St. Thomas, the City of Brantford, Muskoka Lakes, a number of other municipalities don't have standards. And there's some that do. I think that's a personal choice for the municipality.
Okay. No more questions, and I'll leave the rest for deliberation.
Okay. Councillor Howes?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Through you to Greg. And just verifying something you said a few minutes ago. Excuse me. So if we extend it from 10 years to 12 years, the vehicles that are beyond 10 years will have a twice yearly inspection that's the responsibility of the company. Correct?
Through the chair, yeah, that's correct.
Thanks.
Councillor Kyle.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Through you to Greg. So if we were to move the age requirement to 12 years, does that have any impact on liability for the county?
Through the chair, I don't believe it does. I mean, the licensing component, we verify the vehicles are, like we do inspections annually. So, at that point in time, we verify that, the safety standard certificate is valid. The vehicle looks good. We do a cursory inspection because we're not mechanics. But I don't think it increases the liability. Maybe a question for legal, but personally, I don't think it does. I think the liability is carried by the operators.
Good with that? Okay, Councillor Garneau?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Greg. Have we asked the taxi companies their thoughts on option A and B? Please?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Have we asked the taxi companies that initiated this process their thoughts on option A and B?
Through the chair, no, we haven't. We had some internal discussions and we thought that this was the prudent way forward, given the current market and the uncertainty with tariffs on again, off again. We thought, extending it or having an option to extend it would be appropriate.
Okay.
I will say that we did share the report with them when it was posted.
No other questions from committee? I've just got one, Greg, and I appreciate the fact that, anything over 10 years, we're going to have the twice a year safety done on them. That's great. Where did you come up with the 12 years? And where I'm going is, if we're doing safety twice a year on vehicles and we're doing as you say, a once around inspection, because, we're not mechanics, if it looks okay and that type of thing, why not 13 or why not 15?
Through the chair, so we did look at that. We didn't want to lower the standard too much. Given the market, I think that things aren't settled right now and there's a lot of uncertainty. We did see that the City of London had a similar clause in their bylaw, and our bylaw was essentially modeled by their bylaw, and they have increased it to 12 years. We did look at 15. I thought 15 was a little too much of a deviation from the current standard. I thought 2 years was probably fair.
Okay, thank you for that. No other questions from committee? So we've got, Councillor Miller?
Question, a comment.
Go ahead.
Obviously, I'm going to support option B because I moved it. If there was an option C to let them go as long as they want, I would support that. Councillor Garneau asked the questions if the taxi companies have any feedback on the 12 years. I did hear from the one, they said their preference is to just no age limit. I mean, as long as they pass the safety. And keep in mind, the safety is done by a mechanic. But the county also inspects them. But the one taxi company said they would take the 12 years rather than the status quo. So that's the answer to that question. I want to point out too, Mr. Chair, cars have come a long way and technology improves, but technology doesn't improve rapidly for the whole length of whatever's out there. It improves rapidly in the beginning, and then the technology, it improves a little bit, much slower. So, I mean, airbags have been around forever. A lot of safety features have been around forever. They keep adding safety features, and Greg mentioned in the report, blind spot, whatever, and that. And I don't know, I've got a car that does all that safety crap, and I'll be honest with you, I find it more of a distraction than anything else, but that's just my personal bias. But I do know we went and did, for one of our family events, we went to the Brantford Flying Club, and they took us up on a little private plane. And I says, how old is this plane? And the plane that they use is from the 80s. So it's 45 years old, these planes. And obviously, the airports and the airlines and airplanes and pilots, they all take safety extremely seriously. But the planes are well maintained. and they're in great shape. So there's an example of, if you look after it, it doesn't really matter the age, as long as it's looked after well, and it's in good working order, and it's inspected regularly. So, just my long-winded way of saying, I prefer something better, but I think option B is a good compromise for now.
Thank you for that. Nobody else? Okay, so we've got option B on the table, which is to increase it to 12 years. And with that comes 2 safeties a year. I'll call the vote. All in favor? Opposed? That is carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to 8.3, RPT-0175-25, Housing Needs Assessment, Preliminary Findings. Brandon, can I get somebody to throw it on the floor first? Councillor Howes, Councillor Kyle. Do you want to speak to it, Brandon, or?
I do, through the chair, yes, if I could, please.
Absolutely. Floor is yours.
There is a brief presentation here. There's a lot of information in this report, so
Yes,
I thought
there is.
I'd give a bit of a summary first. If I could just get the presentation up, that would be fantastic. Awesome, thank you. Awesome. So through the chair, good morning, everyone. I'm Brandon Courtleaf, Manager of Policy Planning. Here to present our preliminary findings on our housing needs assessment, which is an ongoing project. We came to you in January and asked for permission to get it started. So we thought we would check in, present some of the preliminary findings and get some feedback. So there's lots of good data in this report. I'll go through it very briefly, but we really just wanted to update council and get kind of an endorsement to start providing this information to the public and create our public-facing version of our housing needs assessment. So as I mentioned, we presented a report in January, and council directed the work to be undertaken. I'm just going to present a little bit of the findings, some of our key themes. We'll outline some next steps, and then there's some time for discussion or questions with council. So we got direction for this project in January. It is required, the housing needs assessments required for federal funding under the Canada Community Building Fund. There's been lots of conversation about infrastructure funding at this meeting, so this is kind of a timely project to be done. We have submitted, so this template that is attached, it's attachment 1, 60 or so pages. This is our housing needs assessment data. It's the template that is required to be submitted for this funding. So it has been submitted to the federal government for their review ahead of our deadline. So the deadline was previously actually March 31st, and they moved it to June. So we're ahead of schedule in that sense. So that's been submitted, and what we need to do now is kind of look through this, analyze it. We've come up with some key themes, and we're going to look at how we can kind of move strategies forward to connect the dots with our other housing initiatives in the county. All right, so we've provided a bit of a summary of key findings. I will note that the public engagement for this is still open. It's open for another week, this kind of preliminary side of things. So for those watching, go to engagebrant.ca/housing needs. You can fill out the survey there. There will be another phase of engagement with this once we get into the strategies and presenting some more information and directions that way. But what we've heard, we've had over 250 people respond to the survey so far. And there are some key themes and kind of key indications coming out of that already. No surprise, there's some concern about the rising cost of housing and living. I think we all are aware of that, and we're all feeling that. There's a need for diverse housing types and tenures. So there was some data within the housing needs assessment and feedback from the public speaking to needing more than just, say, single detached housing. We've noted a limited supply of rentals, especially larger units. So families looking for rentals, there are almost none of them available in the county. And from the stakeholder side of things with development, there's some noted barriers to development. These are kind of common across the province, and we've heard some of this from the provincial government as well. Things like high fees, long approvals. And one important one specific to the county is our transportation and transit. So there's limitations with that, with our density and how we can provide housing. So out of that information, we have some key themes. Affordability, so limited options for lower income households. The diversity of our housing, lacking the typologies, different sizes, different tenures, different types of housing for different people that need them, different needs. Availability, so like I mentioned, the shortage of rental, shortage of multi-bedroom homes, or I guess say multi-generational homes. One of the information or interesting pieces of information we've seen with our growth management stuff lately is that our population is going up higher than we expected relative to our housing number. So that's telling us that there are more people living in the houses. So people intergenerationally need to likely purchase houses together, getting creative about how they're putting their finances together to afford the housing. And accessibility. So there's barriers. We've heard this from the public for seniors, young people, people looking to move from one type of housing to another within this community, and those who don't drive. There's a large percentage of the municipality that there are residents who don't drive, and we need to look at that as a key theme. So we have developed some preliminary directions. It's going to reflect all of this information. They support the objectives of the OP. They align with the actions of our strategic plan. So these are our draft. They're for discussion. They'll be refined over the next little while as we get more input. But from our perspective, we'll be looking at developing incentive programs, supporting innovative housing models. We've kind of talked about that with ARUs, with 4 units as of right. We'll be looking at expanding rental housing supply, improvements to infrastructure and transportation planning, and kind of, this was mentioned today, but making sure the dots are connected between that and the land use policies. We'll be updating the official plan and zoning bylaw to reflect any of the policy changes and kind of directional changes we need to. And then we'll be supporting future affordable housing models. So that in itself is being kind of dug into by a few different projects in the county. We have corporate strategy looking into some information, and we have folks with the community safety and well-being plan looking into some affordable housing stuff. So all of that will be connected together through this study. And we'll make sure all of those things align. So our next steps for this, as I mentioned, our initial public engagement is open until the 22nd. Following that, we'll be creating a draft of kind of a public-facing version of this data. It's a lot to digest, so we'll be working to translate it, so to speak, for the public to make it a bit more bite-sized and understandable, and that way we can get some feedback and direction, some meaningful feedback and direction from the public on those directions. We'll be looking at hosting an open house, and then we're aiming to have this final report to council sometime in June. And with that, I will turn it back over, and if there's any questions or comments, I'm happy to answer.
Okay, thanks, Brandon. Committee, we'll go Councillor Howes, Councillor Bell.
Thank you, through the chair, to Brandon. Thanks for the detailed report. It was a lot of information to wade through, but if I were to try to summarize it, I would say that you've verified what we've all been having hunches about. Would that be, does that kind of consistent with your observations too?
Through the chair, I think that's fair to say. It's very consistent with the conversations we've been having about housing.
Thank you. And so with that in mind, there's a couple of things that have jumped out to me, and I'm not looking for an answer necessarily right now, but it is a question for as we proceed into this strategic recommendation step. The distinct shortage of rentals is part of a bigger problem, like everything else, but part of a bigger problem where it's tough to be a landlord in some circumstances now, or it appears tough to be a landlord, and that's not helping the tenants who need to find modest housing solutions that are going to be available for 2 or 3 years. The Airbnb type or the B&B type businesses have further reduced the availability of more long-term rental arrangements. But I'm as we move ahead, I'm just wondering how you know, we keep hearing about condos, right? So if a building's gonna be built across the street and if it's gonna be 5 or 6 stories tall and if it has commercial on the ground floor or whatever on the ground floor and 4 or 5 stories of residential, one of the questions that we quickly ask is the intention for this to be rentals or condos? And as us figuring out how to incentivize more rentals is a bigger picture task that involves multi-levels of government, and so that's one that's constantly on my mind. And the other one is, and I don't know how this fits into your categories, but I'm interested in your opinion. If you look back to the 1940s and 1950s, there would be a situation where somebody might own a house with 4 or 5 bedrooms. And, you know, maybe their kids have grown up and moved on or whatever, but they've still got this big house. And they would essentially have a rooming house or a boarding house. And it's not something we've seen too much of in recent decades, but I'm wondering how that fits in officially or unofficially into the program, because it starts to get into situations where, you know, like if I take on a roommate at my house and they rent a bedroom and share the bathroom and share the kitchen, am I a landlord? Am I not a landlord? And if I take on 4 roommates and they all need parking spots, what does that do for the neighborhood planning and the, so like, is there any visibility in the current framework of planning for that type of solution to the housing mix that we need? I'm just wondering if you had any thoughts on that one.
Sure, through the chair to Councillor House, that is definitely on our radar. It's something that's actually already in our zoning bylaw. It's mentioned in our zoning bylaw, rooming and boarding houses. We recognize that the way maybe it's regulated isn't the best, so we're looking at that, how to kind of add some flexibility. Because in the end, like you say, if you rent out a room, you are considered a landlord, right? If you're making money from that, you're a landlord. So we'll have to kind of connect the dots between the Residential Tenancies Act, our policies, having that kind of as a missing middle option for rental. Again, we're building large houses as well right now. So that's probably, we're going to see that in those houses. So that's it, yeah. To shorten that answer, it's on our radar.
Okay. Councillor Bell.
Chair, through you to Brandon. Brandon, the timing of this seems a little odd. Isn't this the sort of thing we should have done before we did our official plan?
Through the chair, we'll call it a feedback loop, I suppose. So we're always like, the OP is 5 years old now, almost, in a sense. So we're just doing these things to keep as up to date as possible. But yes, yeah, hypothetically, it does inform your OP.
It's an idle comment on my part,
Yeah.
but there we go. But Steve, Councillor Howes asked the question of, yeah, is this just confirmation of what we already knew? And I think I felt the same. Have we learned anything new out of this?
Through the chair, Councillor Bell, I think at this point, we haven't seen anything surprisingly new. Like it's been mentioned, we kind of had a sense of these things, but now we have the data to support it, so to speak, which is fundamental in the policy world to support the directions we go in, right? So that will give us some more teeth as we move forward. Instead of just saying to someone, this is what's happening, we have stuff to point to prove it.
Yeah, thank you. If I may continue. Yeah, it's always good to have facts, and I appreciate that. But given that we have these facts now, we also understand pretty much what the development picture looks like for the next, I don't know, 10 years, both in St. George and in Paris. How closely does it match the housing needs assessment?
Through the chair, we'll have to look, that will be a component of what we're looking through with this kind of next phase of it. as far as we see, it seems to be the same kind of things happening of what we already have. So we'll need to look at what kind of incentives and adjustments we can make, right, to align things with our housing needs. If we know there's a need there, we're going to need to direct people that way. And it's tough. We've had this conversation before when development is approved 10 years prior to it moving ahead. We've got to get a bit creative, I think, with how we implement this stuff to make sure that we are getting some of the things that will benefit the community, and we know they will benefit the community.
I'm going to try and paraphrase what you said. There is a mismatch.
Yeah.
Yeah. So indeed, in understanding what we have to do to make the Lausannes and the Empires and the Grandviews do something different is going to be interesting, and I look forward to seeing the ideas that you bring forward. One final tiny question. There's a comment here that says municipal fees and delays now account for 24 to 30% of the cost of a new home in Brant. Is that borne out by fact, or is that, because it looks like it's a comment from somebody?
Through the chair, so that was received through our stakeholder engagement survey. But I have dug into that a little bit, and there is factual information to support it. From the province of Ontario, some of the reports that they had provided during their changes to the provincial regime. Whether it's that specific number in Brant or not, that I'm not sure of at this point, but we will look into that. But 20% seems to be the common understanding, at least in the construction and development world.
Yeah, so just earlier in the week, I think we had a note, I think it came from, I'm not sure where it came from, but it talked about removal of red tape. Oh, it was an article in the newspaper about the removal of red tape. And this is the kind of red tape I presume Doug Ford was talking about. But in my world, red tape also is common sense bureaucracy that prevents us from doing things the wrong way and ensures that we do things the right way. So some of that 20% should not be dismissed as not being valuable. In my world, it is valuable, and we need to be really careful about throwing babies out with bathwater. Thank you.
Mayor Bailey, then Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To Brandon, is there any way that we can get a list of what the proposed rents would be if they decided they're going to do some rents and some condos? Because I think there's a bit of a disconnect there too, because we have a wonderful social media thing, we have wonderful communications, and if we get notes that say, the first 2 floors are going to be rental, and for a 1-bedroom it's $2,350, for a 2-bedroom it's $2,700, we haven't fixed anything. The same people that are looking for a place just to live, all of a sudden, the buzz goes around the county that, Lausanne or somebody is doing a certain percentage of rentals. But if it doesn't work and it doesn't suit and it doesn't fit, it doesn't mean anything. Mm-hmm. So then, the people that, just don't want, that are at an age where they don't want to buy another condo will rent these things for those kinds of prices. But again, we haven't covered that market that just has the 2 pensions, the old age pension and the CPP. These 1-bedroom apartments will do them no good at all. So I don't know whether Brandon can talk to builders and say, if you were able to come up with something that was fairly minimal, fairly small, what would you be expecting for a 1-bedroom apartment in downtown Paris? Would it be $1,600? I mean, the days of $1,000 are gone, I would think. And then once it becomes over 2 or close to 2,000, it doesn't help anybody that really needs the help right now. So maybe you could talk or we can talk if you would rather us do it. Council can have them come in and explain what their costing would be for a 1 or a 2-bedroom, say in downtown Paris, downtown St. George. Because there are going to be a lot of buildings with more than 2 floors going up all over the county. And if even 1 floor could be rented and accessible with ramps, so that the accessibility piece does not sort of bother the people above the bottom floor. Find out what their intentions really are, because if their intentions aren't a fit, then they don't work. Thank you.
Councillor Miller?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of questions to Brandon. Brandon, this whole housing needs assessment, this was driven by the fact that in order to access the Canada Community Building Fund, we had to do this, is that correct? That's what's driving
Through
it?
the chair, that is correct.
Do we know how much we have gotten from it or potentially could get? Is it worth it?
I may defer that question to Heather Boyd if I could. She'll have an answer for that.
Actually, I'll
Or
ask
one of the other.
Heather Mifflin. I'm sure she has the number.
Through the chair, I'll look it up quickly. That is the federal gas tax. They just changed the name, so I'll get you.
Okay.
It's, I think, just over 2 million.
All right, so for the $75,000 study, probably good investment. The thing is, municipalities are creatures of the province, as you know, and, but here we have the federal government, you know, making us jump through hoops, and I think no matter who gets into power next, I think we're gonna be asked to jump through more hoops, so we'll probably see more requests coming down the pipeline for stuff like this. One of the things you mentioned, and it's already been talked about, was expand rental housing supply. I heard Councillor House mention boarding houses. Do you have any actionable items for that? Expanding rental housing supply?
Through the chair, not at this point. We will need to come up with a plan for that, and yeah, it'll be a bit more complicated than we think. But there are some initiatives. There's lots to look at. Just to provide some context, there's lots to look into this with respect to what both the federal and provincial government are doing right now. There's some opportunities for DC exemptions, things like that. So again, we can have those conversations with developers that are building new buildings to see what kind of rental stock can be provided, what kind of pricing, and provide some incentives that way. That's kind of a preliminary look at it, but there will be some more information with the next report.
Okay. And I know Councillor House mentioned that sometimes it can be difficult, or in some cases be difficult to be a landlord. I would disagree. I would say it's difficult to be a landlord in every case, given the Landlord-Tenant Act. And I know of what I speak. I am a landlord. I've talked to enough landlords. You know, I know the guy whose tenant destroyed the place, and the landlord's on the hook to fix it up for him, so he has a functioning bathroom, even though it was that destroyed it. I know a farmhouse that was purchased as part of a property by a farmer, and it was an older house, but he didn't rent it out. I said, well, why aren't you renting it out? He says, what, are you crazy? I don't need that headache. And he'd rather use it for the fire department to train in a house burning than rent it out. So there's a huge disincentive with the current Landlord-Tenant Act. It really, the province talks about getting red tape. The province could do could really help us out by cleaning up that Landlord-Tenant Act. It's way too much to one side. You know, boarding rooms, I think are a great idea, but the problem in today's world is a renter can quickly become a squatter. And then what do you do, right? Now you've got a year of that, so it could be a problem. But I'll leave it at that. All I'm saying is if we're looking for actionable items as far as expanding the rental housing supply, we're limited, I think, until we can incentivize landlords to get in on it. And the way the legislation is now, there's no incentive. And then, Brandon, you did mention emergency shelter spaces. You said 118 beds. And I'll just add that probably we won't see that number go up. Social Services is not intending to increase that number for the simple reason that they'd rather spend the money on preventing the homelessness in the first place. And if you want to see a good discussion, just watch the last meeting on YouTube. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mayor Bailey?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Brandon. So some of these big houses that are up on Banfield and Baird and some of the big houses on the side roads, if you decided to do something as a boarding house, what if doing that, you decide that you're making enough money on a boarding house that you might as well move off-site? Once the owner of the boarding house moves off-site, is their house considered an apartment building?
Through the chair, I'd have to look that specifically up in the zoning. I don't think that it is. There's some ambiguity in that, but that's something we're looking into because we recognize that is a jump into a kind of different level of ownership and rental and situation. So that's on our radar as well.
Thank you.
Good. No other questions from committee? Heather?
Just to clarify, the gas tax for 2025 and 2026 is just under 2.6 million, and for 2027 and 2028 is just under 2.7 million.
2.6, 2.7. Okay, thank you for that. No other questions from committee? Just one comment that I have on this, and I'm always telling people, if you want to understand what's going on with council, is to read the agendas. And we talked about a lot of information in this particular, you know, in this needs assessment, and if you look at the water and wastewater earlier, there's a lot of information that has been put forth in this agenda alone. And where I'm going with this is I appreciate the fact, Brandon, of the words you said, you're looking to translate what's in here for public consumption. I think that's huge, because us around this table, reading those two reports, we don't even understand it all. There's a lot more that we understand than the general public, but I appreciate the fact that we're trying to put it in digestible bites for the public to just do that, to digest, because that's important. I mean, they could read a report and it goes over their head, it's not gonna, it means nothing to them. So out of all the information that's in there, and it's fantastic information, to me, those are the most important words that were spoken today, is the fact that we're gonna translate it into public consumption. So thank you for that, and thank you for that report. So what we have is, so there's a motion to receive his information, and that the preliminary findings of the housing assessment as outlined in this report be endorsed, and that staff be directed upon completion of the engagement phase of the project to prepare a draft for public-facing housing needs assessment report presentation for council. So we did have a mover and a seconder, and they're good with that? That's what they're moving and seconding? No other questions? I'll call the vote. All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to section 9, which is committee report minutes. Brant Heritage Committee report. Can I get a mover? Councillor Howes, Councillor McAlpine. Questions? I will call the vote. All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Section 10, communications. We've got 2 communications there. Motion to receive them both. Councillor Coleman, Councillor Garneau. Questions? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. I didn't ask at the beginning, does anybody have anything for other business? Councillor Coleman.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I forgot to mention this earlier in the agenda. Is there any way, and I brought this up before, that we could get a progress report or what's going on in the municipality in our projects? All I hear mostly, and don't say I'm critical, is the downtown dig. But there's a lot of other projects going around this municipality, and I'd like to know what's going on. We used to get a monthly report when we had Public Works, and we see nothing anymore. And I don't just want it in the Friday file, but I like it to come with this report to know what's going on. Because residents do ask what's going on in their area. And coming up is a hard surfacing or a gravel road conversion and things like that. So we'd like to know what's going on. Thank you.
Okay. There is the major project spreadsheet.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. You're correct. The major project report is meant to do that. It's not on a monthly basis, but it is right now delivered on a quarterly basis. But what we will be rolling out in the coming months is going to be the council portal, so that you won't just have those reports, you'll have access to the portal, which will have all of the most recent updates from staff in it on all projects. I'll reiterate that it's not every single project, it's what's deemed a major project. So if there's anything that you don't see on that spreadsheet that you want updates on, just notify staff and we'll make sure that we get that to you.
Councilor Coleman?
I don't think I need to ask. I think it should be there, so we know what's going on. That's all I'm saying, is that we used to have it. It didn't take an awful lot, but you knew where the project was at that time. Whether it was in the wastewater or water or whatever, you knew where that project, bridges or whatever, you knew how long it was going to go. And when people call, they don't always look up on the web.
Mayor Bailey?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, just to support Councillor Coleman, I've already had an email today asking when the Wilkins Center will be up and running. I also heard from someone this morning that, first of all, that we didn't need another fire hall, which is ridiculous, we do, and when it's going to be built and finished and open and running. So I guess people do want to know stuff, and we don't know those dates. We know the projected dates for some things, but it would be a phone call for me to find out when the Wilkins Center will be open. And I don't know what the date of christening the new fire hall is, and as I said, that was just this morning. And you do feel kind of silly when you should know when the fire hall is going to be open and when the Wilkins Center is going to be up and running. For bookings, they wanted to know because they wanted to book it. So I think Councillor Coleman's right. I think people, if we had that list or if we had that information, we might have to say, just give me a minute and go to another phone or something and get it off our desk. But if we scrolled down and could find out the opening date for things like that, it makes us look a little bit more clever than to say, I'm not sure, I can get back to you. So I do agree we need to know stuff like that.
Okay, I think that's been noted there, so. Okay, anybody else, other business? If not, I'm looking for a mover to go in camera to discuss RPT-0171-25, a position, plan, procedure, criteria instructed to be applied to any negotiations carried on behalf of the municipality local board. Mover, Councillor Howes. Councillor Miller, call the vote, all in favor. Opposed? That is carried. Okay, we are back into open session. Thank you very much. We are going to, there's nothing else on the agenda other than our next meeting as May the 20th in council chambers. Time to adjourn. Councillor Coleman. Have a great day.